We can now bring in Aaron David Miller, Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, as well as former State Department analyst, advisor, and negotiator in both Republican and Democratic administrations. Thank you so much for joining us on the program today. This conflict has gone on for nearly 2 years now. Israeli hostages remain in Gaza. Much of the enclave is destroyed. Famine has been confirmed. At what point is Donald Trump going to tell Benjamin Netanyahu enough is enough?
It's a fascinating question. I'd only point out some context here. When it comes to sustained and serious pressure by American presidents against Israeli actions, even though those actions may undercut American interests, presidents, Republican or Democrat, the ones I've worked for, Jimmy Carter to Bush 43, have for any number of reasons failed to impose significant or serious pressure. If you ask me, when do I think Donald Trump might impose serious costs or consequences? It would be under one of three circumstances. Number one, if he drew the conclusion that Benjamin Netanyahu was, to use Trump's word in relationship with Vladimir Putin, playing him. That's one question, one circumstance. Second, if Benjamin Netanyahu made Donald Trump look weak, that's a second set of circumstances. And third, given the transactional nature of this president and his own self-absorption, if Benjamin Netanyahu came between something that Donald Trump really wanted and was proving to be a major obstacle that reflected negatively on what Donald Trump cares about. Over the last 6 months, none of these circumstances have applied. And it's hard for me to see, given the attention span of this president, that what it would actually take to get Trump to actually impose consequences. The phone call, Benjamin Netanyahu end the war or else, that phone call is never going to take place.
Even though Donald Trump is losing support amongst mainstream MAGA Republicans like Marjorie Taylor Greene, like the likes of Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly, all these people have been speaking out and saying Israel is going too far.
True enough, but that's not, by no means is that the vast majority of the president's MAGA base. It's certainly not his primary base. I don't think this is going to turn. I don't think Donald Trump is being politically wounded because Republicans are turning on him. Some are, but I'm not sure they really matter. And the other reality is, the amount of international pressure. I understand the sense that it appears to be that Israel is being turned into an international pariah, is under great pressure. When I look at what the Europeans have done, the three European states that Israel cares most about, the British, the French, and the Germans, even the Germans who have imposed a partial arms embargo, they're now buying over $4 billion of aero missile defense system equipment from Israel. So French virtue signaling on the issue of Palestinian statehood, Keir Starmer's the same. That's not going to change Donald Trump's calculation. One last point. And the Arabs, this to me is the truly stunning reality. Neither Israel's treaty partners, Jordan or Egypt, nor its Abraham Accord partners, the ones that are now in those agreements, Bahrain and the Emiratis, or the putative big prize, Saudi Arabia, none of them have saw fit to impose a single cost or consequence on Israel or the United States. In fact, far from it, the Europeans can't get to Washington fast enough to ingratiate themselves with Donald Trump. So Mr. Netanyahu is not, in my judgment, under the kind of pressure from the region, from the international community, and certainly not yet from the United States, to fundamentally alter the trajectory of his policies toward this sad and tragic war.
I think everyone realizes that the silence from the Arab world is kind of deafening. You and I have spoken in the past, and you said that Netanyahu can essentially do what he wants in Gaza as long as Knesset math is on his side. But to what end? If you speak to Israelis, they are scared to travel. Yesterday, we even had Thomas Friedman, who wrote that his operation in Gaza is making Israel a pariah state. So at what point is he willing to risk it all?
Look, Benjamin Netanyahu's constituencies and his priorities. I mean, Tom Friedman's a friend, and what Tom writes is powerful. It's not going to alter either Donald Trump's calculation or Netanyahu's. He's the only Israeli prime minister in the history of Israel that is on trial for bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in the Jerusalem District Court 4 years running. He's not presiding over the most extreme right-wing government in the history of the state of Israel. Two of his ministers are Jewish supremacists and racists. And right now, the paradox is, since the Knesset is on recess until after the Jewish holidays, till October 19th, he is virtually free from any legislation or efforts to dissolve the government. I would say you need to do two things to change his calculations. Number one, you'd have to see strikes over a sustained period of time that shut down the government. You'd have to see resignations from the core security and intelligence officials, the head of Mossad, the head of Shin Bet, the chief of staff, and you would have to see much bolder and firmer action from Washington
Even though
in order to get Benjamin Netanyahu's attention.
Even though we had an open letter from hundreds of former Israeli security officials essentially calling on the U.S. president to pressure Netanyahu to bring this war to an end, they themselves are saying that Hamas no longer poses a threat.
Look, it's powerful logic. I worked with several other Israeli prime ministers. None of them would have been behaving the way that Benjamin Netanyahu is. But he has a priority. He is, let's be clear, the most skillful, politically ruthless Israeli politician on the political scene today. And what I'm about to say even terrifies me. I think you'll end up with an election probably in early 2026. This government was formed when? In December of 2022. The average length of an Israeli government since independence is 1.9 years. This government will probably go to term. And as ridiculous as it sounds, it is quite conceivable that Benjamin Netanyahu could win another term.
It could be. We'll see what happens between now and then. I want to talk about what you suggested earlier about France's virtue signaling when it comes to the recognition of a Palestinian state, because this is something I've even asked people in Gaza about, and they said this is not going to realistically change our lives as long as the war goes on. But the thing is, even the fact that France wants to get the ball rolling in terms of a two-state solution down the line, the fact that Paris made this announcement, then you have Benjamin Netanyahu accuses France of essentially fanning the flames of anti-Semitism in this country. Charles Kushner wrote a letter to the French president saying France is not doing enough to combat anti-Semitism, even though France has recognized it has a problem with the spike in anti-Semitism in this country. They have put measures in place. So it's a vicious cycle, isn't it? Because even if France wants to do something and stand up to Israel, it gets accused of anti-Semitism and what have you.
I mean, I think you're making my point. And I think it's one of the anomalies of the current situation, where you have tremendous international outrage and opprobrium heaped on Israel. You have the International Court of Justice still debating, and may take them another year to determine whether or not the Israelis have committed genocide. You have the ICC imposing arrest warrants on a sitting Israeli prime minister and a former defense minister, as well as 3 Hamas officials, all of whom are now dead. And yet, the constituencies that keep that keep Benjamin Netanyahu sustained, his right-wing coalition and the Likud party, I might add, which does not have a history of devouring its own, and the U.S.-Israeli relationship. A president who, frankly, in many respects has done things with respect to Israel that no American president has ever done. He opened negotiations with Hamas in March of this year, about which the Israelis learned after the fact. He cut a deal with the Houthis, again, about which the Israelis learned after the fact. He started negotiations with Iran. Donald Trump has the capacity, because of his own self-absorption. He does not have any of the emotional or psychological attachments to Israel that previous American presidents, particularly Bill Clinton and clearly Joe Biden, who described himself as a Christian Zionist. So Donald Trump has the capacity. What he lacks is the opportunity. When Donald Trump believes that there's something in this for him, when the situation gets so bad that he is now held responsible, then he'll act, but not until.
Aaron, David Miller, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thanks for having me, always.